Welcome to episode number 15 of the Who Am I podcast with the Southside Church of Christ, where we are digging into what it means to be a Christian week in and week out. I'm Brian Dill, and here with me, as always, is the amazing Jackson Wells.
Hello, everybody.
Today we are talking about a guy named Barnabas. Jackson, have you ever known anyone named Barnabas?
No.
Yeah. Well, because, there's so many weird names out there.
Oh, yeah.
But Barnabas never caught on. I looked up 2021. It was the 5,521st most common name.
Wow. Well,
there were only 16 baby boys in 2021 named Barnabas.
No way. That surprises me. I figured it'd be more than that. Good grief.
Yeah.
So I looked up a list of famous Barnabases. And
okay.
The Bible Barnabas is the number one.
Oh, well, for sure.
After that, it's like footballer from Nigeria or something like that. And it's
right.
Like, okay,
right.
Yeah, these guys aren't that famous. Compare that to other names like Tom. And it was
sure.
There were some like disambiguation pages.
Oh, brother.
Which there were so many people named Tom whatever that they were like pages dedicated to making sure you knew which Tom whatever you were talking about. But you don't have to worry about that for Barnabas. If we're talking about Barnabas, you know who we're talking about.
That's exactly right. Well, let's go ahead and get this episode started. So, Barnabas. This week, our episode is called Am I a Barnabas? And one of the things that you listeners out there may or may not know is that Barnabas was not Barnabas's name. I mean, his name was Joseph, but the apostles apparently gave him this nickname of Barnabas, and we'll get into why that is in just a minute. But this got me to thinking, Jackson, have you ever been given a nickname that stuck?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
I'm laughing because they went from Joseph to Barnabas. Like nothing indicates in the way that we speak.
Right. I don't think nicknames worked the same back in the first century.
No, because my nickname as a child was Jack Sprat.
Oh, okay.
Which
Sprat or Brat?
Sprat.
Okay,
and,
good.
There were definitely, we'd play on it. It was Jack Sprat. Brat at points in time, but my Uncle Donnie came up with the name. Well, he didn't come up with the name Jack Sprat, but that's what he always called me. And so the name Jack Sprat derives from a poem written in like the 1600s, and there's all this like idea about what it actually means. Is it about King Charles and his greedy wife? But I'm going to read you the poem in the way that we get in the nickname real quick. It's just 4 lines. Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And so between them both, you see, they licked the platter clean. And
all right.
Yeah, so what I find funny about that is Jack Sprat is a person who is small in stature, or a sprat. That's what that means.
Oh, okay.
I was never small in stature. So I don't know why Uncle Donnie thought that I needed to be called Sprat. Other than it was just it went with it.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
Did you have any nicknames?
No, not really. Because I mean, kids will make up stuff. Things that rhyme with your name. Lion Brian, whatever.
Was it Lyin or
yes.
Lion?
Yeah, not Lion like the Lions Club that I am actually in now.
You are Lion Brian.
But I think the closest...
Someone told you that when you were a kid and you took it very seriously.
I guess so. That's it. But I think the closest that I came to having a nickname was a lot of people, like in high school, would just call me Dill.
Yeah.
Just because there were so many Brians.
Yeah.
And so like in band, for example, there were 4 Brians and a Bryant.
Wow.
And it was like, well, if somebody just says Brian, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
And so it was just easier for people to just call me Dill. Well, and I thought, that was just a high school thing, because there's so many Bryans. Well, I get to college and just naturally, just people just start calling me Dill again. I'm like, what is this? I don't know what it is. I mean, it's just, and my wife, my now wife, for a long time was just call me Dill. But once we started dating pretty seriously, I was like, hey, could you please actually call me by my name instead of like we're on a football team together or something?
What's up, Dill?
So
that's great. See, I think I would have called you Big Deal because it sounds like big deal,
Right.
Speaking of Dill, I've got a cousin. It's Donnie's son. So the guy who gave me the nickname,
right?
His son was Dylan, and so he was Dill Pickle.
Yes.
And so to this day, we'll be hanging out with Dylan, and we'll be, what's up, Pickle?
So yeah, of course, there were all kinds of pickle or whatever, just things like that with the last name Dill, of course. Yeah, nothing really ever stuck as an official nickname or anything.
I've always wanted to be called Jack just because it sounds cool. And there's actually somebody at church that has started doing that.
Is that right?
Kind of as a joke, yeah. But I always introduce myself as Jackson, and so people just call me Jackson. But
right.
If you're listening and you want to call me Jack, go ahead.
Is it Marvin?
No, it's
okay.
It's Wanda.
Okay. All right, so now as we get into the meat of the week, Barnabas's nickname Barnabas means son of encouragement. And I think that is maybe the coolest nickname ever, because I mean we don't get nicknames like that today. We get Jack Sprat or Dill Pickle or whatever. It's like that doesn't actually mean anything cool. Son of encouragement, man. Yeah. Of all the nicknames you could be given, that's a pretty great nickname to be given.
We're going to look at 3 moments in the life of Barnabas that demonstrate why he got that nickname. I think of football players a little bit whenever I think of like nicknames, like
sure,
Peyton Manning. He's the sheriff, right? Is he the sheriff?
I don't know. I never heard that one.
You never heard that one? I think he's the
Maybe
sheriff.
I didn't pay enough attention.
I think he's the sheriff because he's calling the shots.
Okay.
And he earned that nickname because of what he did while he was on the field.
Sure.
Barnabas earned this nickname because of the things that he did while he was encouraging others.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The first text that we're going to look at is in Acts chapter 4. They're all in Acts, but the first one is going to be in Acts chapter 4, verses 36 through 37, and I'll read that. Thus Joseph, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, a Levite, a native of Cyprus, sold a field that belonged to him and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet.
Okay.
Pretty good start. We've got a guy who's willing to give of himself.
Yes, absolutely. I always think that that's one of the keys to the idea of being someone that's encouraging.
Yeah,
is generosity.
Yeah, it's contagious too.
Right.
I think that whenever somebody else sees someone giving, they immediately think that you can either think of it negatively or of it positively, and I think people tend to think of it positively because then they're like, well, what can I give? And so Barnabas is encouraging others to give, not by the words he's saying here, but by his action. And we'll see later there's action involved as well.
Right. Oh, sure.
Or there's words involved as well. But he was willing to go out of his way to encourage others. And he may have not even realized that in this moment he was encouraging other people. Because I think today we are encouraged by that, just those 2 verses. Today we're giving in a very similar manner, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really cool to see, and we see that now, of course, the negative side as you go on into chapter 5 is that when Ananias and Sapphira see, oh, hey, Barnabas and these other people are getting a lot of recognition, we want some recognition too, and then they go about their giving in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But Barnabas, inspires people with his giving, and he's, what I think is interesting about that passage there in Acts chapter 4 is that it says that the apostles called him Barnabas. And to me, I get the impression that he already had this nickname
Yeah.
even before this.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, man, what else has this guy been doing? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
The next passage that we're going to look at is Acts chapter 9, and it's just a couple verses here after the apostle, or the man who becomes the apostle Paul, who is known as Saul still at this point. After he has been converted, he comes back to Jerusalem, and starting with verse 26 of Acts chapter 9, it says, "And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles, and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord, who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he," that's is Saul, "went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord." Now, think about what Barnabas is doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Saul has been persecuting the church. And Saul may have even imprisoned some of Barnabas's friends and family.
Yeah.
And yet Barnabas is willing to give Saul the benefit of the doubt. And I've wondered, how did Barnabas know what's written there in verse 27? How did he know that Saul had been converted on the road to Damascus? How did he know that he had preached in Damascus boldly for the name? I think the answer to that, the only way he could have known, is by talking to Saul.
Yeah.
And having a genuine conversation with Saul. And I think that's one of the things that we sort of struggle with when it comes to what assumptions we do or don't make about people. Mm-hmm. We're suspicious. Mm-hmm. We think that maybe they have ulterior motives, or we think they're not telling us the whole truth, or something that causes us to hesitate. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to be more like Barnabas right here?
Yeah. And the implications of this, of Barnabas kind of standing up for now Paul, are huge. Because if Paul had come into this discipleship and then been like, no, like everybody had been like, no, I'm sorry, you can't be with us. You tried to kill us. No,
right.
You're not welcome here. If he hadn't have gotten past that, would we have gotten
right.
the letters that we have?
Right. Imagine how different the history of the church would have been, or might have been.
Yeah. I think it's so important to have somebody in your corner willing to go to bat for you.
Right.
And the only way that you're going to have that or be that for somebody is to have a conversation with them.
Absolutely.
And get to know them. That way you can vouch for them, because that's exactly what Barnabas did for Paul here.
Right. So if we want to be more like Barnabas, if we want to be an encourager, then one of the steps that we have to take is getting to know people, actually taking the time to do that, and assume the best first about people.
Innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
We don't always buy into that these days, do we?
We don't.
But what a great example that is coming from Barnabas there.
Yep. The third passage that we're going to look at is Acts chapter 11, verses 20 through 26, and this is what it says. "But there were some of them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, who on coming to Antioch spoke to the Hellenists, also preaching the Lord Jesus. And the hand of the Lord was with them, and a great number who believed turned to the Lord. The report of this came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he came and saw the grace of God, he was glad, and he exhorted them all to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose. For he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. And a great many people were added to the Lord. So Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul, and when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch. For a whole year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And in Antioch the disciples were first called Christians."
Yeah, that's such a cool passage to think about. There's so many little things going on there
Yeah.
that I think are really interesting, especially when it comes to Barnabas's role
Yeah.
in all of this.
He's in Jerusalem. He gets they start hearing about the stuff that's going on in Antioch, right? And he gets sent to Antioch, and
Right.
he's like a hype man.
He is. Well, and I was just thinking, the apostles had to say, okay, who should we send to Antioch? Do we send Peter? Nah, maybe not. Do we send Thomas? Nah. Thaddeus? No.
Yeah.
I don't know what the thought process was, but for whatever reason, it's who's really made for this? Barnabas.
Yeah, it's just neat that we have a character in the Bible that we overlook a lot. I think maybe because
Sure.
there's not as much about him.
That's true.
But that he's known as the encourager. When's the last time we had somebody come to church just to be like, "Man, you guys are doing great.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
Right.
I love what you're doing," and then stayed for a year.
Yeah.
That's I don't think that's ever happened, but it's just such a unique thing, and it's a realization for us. We need to be encouraging to other Christians because who knows what is going on in anybody's lives. If we can be that positive person for somebody else or for a congregation, it makes a big difference in a lot of lives.
Absolutely. And I think about, what we skipped here between chapter 9 and chapter 11 is that Saul/Paul had to escape Jerusalem. He had to run home to Tarsus to keep from being arrested himself. And Barnabas is here in Antioch, and he sees how great things are going, and for whatever reason, he thinks, who could really be of use here is Saul.
Yes.
So he goes over to Tarsus, which is not a short trip, and brings him back to Antioch. And I think that's such a great example for us of what it means to be an encourager, because each of us have probably had at some point in our lives someone who takes us under their wing and says, you know what, you would be really good at this. Or, hey, have you tried this? I think you could do this really well.
Yeah. That in and of itself, there was a retreat that I was at several years ago, and we talked about Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy. And the relationship that each one of those had with each other.
Right.
And we all need to be somebody's Barnabas, and we all need a Barnabas.
That's right.
We all need to be somebody's Paul, and we need to be a Paul to somebody.
Right.
We're all a Timothy to somebody else.
Yes.
I don't guess you can. I guess you could be a Timothy to the person you're being. Sorry, getting convoluted. But the idea of being the encourager or having the encourager, the only way, and this goes back to a point we said earlier, the only way to get to that point is to talk to people and to get to know them.
Right.
Because when you get to know somebody, that's when you can say, man, you would be great at leading singing, or you would be great at teaching a class. That's the only way you're going to get to know a person to encourage them.
Right.
And Barnabas was apparently really, really good at that because he saw the potential in Paul. He knew Paul well enough and was like, this is where I can plug you in and you can start to shine.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I remember my first sermon that I ever preached was begrudgingly at the end of my high school years. My youth minister, Danny Boggs, said, as I was getting toward the end of my senior year, he said, hey, do you remember when I first came here and showed up as the new youth minister, which was when I was 13 and just coming into the youth group myself? Mm-hmm. He said, we made a deal that you would preach one sermon before you graduated high school. And I said, what? I do not remember this. I think you're making this up. I still don't ever remember making that deal. But he said that it was me and my friend Alan both had said, okay, sure, yeah, we agree to do that or whatever. And he said, I tell you what, instead of each of you preaching a sermon, you can split the sermon. Each of you do half a sermon. Phew, okay, all right, good. Well, like 2 days before Sunday, Alan tells me he's not going to do it. And I'm
man.
like, dude, what are you doing? And so I'm just like, I think maybe that sermon was 11 minutes. I
Hey,
mean,
sounds about right.
it was so bad. And part of it was like me reading out of a book that, like, I was like, okay, this is a really good point. I'm just going to read this, you know. So it was so bad. But I got a lot of encouragement from, you know, my youth minister, my preacher, other people in the congregation, lots of good encouragement.
Yeah.
Not because I was thinking about going into ministry at that point in my life or anything, but it was really something that I thought about more later as I started thinking about ministry full time. And I thought, oh, yeah, maybe I can do this. You know, nobody said, hey, don't ever speak publicly again.
This is nobody's ever come up to me after a sermon and been like, you need to quit.
You need to rethink your, maybe ministry's not for you.
Yeah. To be honest, I think anybody who is willing to get up in front of a congregation and speak deserves some level of encouragement.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Because some people just aren't built for that. But whenever you do receive that encouragement, it does make you think: is this? Do I need to do this more? Should I do this more?
Right.
So we need to encourage our young people to take those chances, put themselves out there, whether it be teaching a class or, you know, doing something. We need to encourage them. One, they'll probably like it more than they realize. Two, they might really find that it's something that they want to continue doing later in life, which is, we need that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I think, you know, we said it with the Acts chapter 9 passage, but I think it applies to this passage too. You know, where would the story of the church have been if Barnabas had not gone over to Tarsus and picked up Saul, and brought him back to Antioch? You know, he may have stayed in Tarsus and just decided to be a teacher or something, and just lived out the rest of his life in Tarsus, and then I don't know where we get 2/3 of the New Testament.
Yeah, for real.
Well, I think now the question is, am I a Barnabas? That's the question that I think we're encouraging everyone who's listening this week to ask themselves. Am I a Barnabas? I honestly can't think of many better ways to be known than to be known as an encourager.
If you can earn the nickname Barnabas, one, you know you're around good people because they read the Bible, because nobody else knows what Barnabas means. And two, they know that you are willing to go out of your way for other people, to encourage people, which is a great quality.
Absolutely. So just keep in mind this week, you know, if you want to be more like Barnabas, be more generous, give people the benefit of the doubt, communicate with people, and look for ways to help others to use their gifts for God. We want to thank everyone for listening to this week's episode. We hope and pray that each episode is helpful to you in some way, especially as we are focusing on growing in our identity as followers of Jesus. Have a blessed day.